Hi, welcome everyone to today's webinar. We are so excited to share this journey with you. This is UFCW Outreach's first webinar, and for the next hour and a half, we have an incredible lineup of presenters who will speak to findings from our 2020 historic union worker survey through the perspective of why the UFCW matters. My name is Emmanuel Lopez Bastos. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Human Rights, Equity, and Diversity Department Coordinator at UFCW Canada, and I have the pleasure of being a founding member of UFCW Outreach Board, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator tonight. So we'll start off with a land acknowledgement, followed by some housekeeping rules. To situate my comments today, I come from Toronto, Ontario, the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and since time immemorial, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and many other First Peoples. Participants are joining from diverse areas across the US and Canada, and so we acknowledge those nations too. UFCW is commonly known as the Food Workers Union. As such, we recognize that Indigenous people are the first and rightful landholders of Turtle Island and the first to embrace a sustainable relationship to the food system we contribute to and benefit from today. So now for some housekeeping rules. Please note, on the top right-hand corner of your picture are 3 dots. If you click on these, you should see the rename option. Panelists have their preferred pronouns on the screen. You are welcome to state your preferred pronoun ahead of tonight's discussion. Now, tonight you'll hear from numerous presenters, and we encourage participation from you throughout the chat, the polls, and the Q&A. To do that, we must uphold an environment of respect. The chat is being monitored. Any negative or hateful comments will be deleted and the individual will be removed from this forum. Now to our journey. First off, I have the pleasure of presenting Michelle Kessler. Michelle is the Outreach Founding Chair. She's the Secretary Treasurer of UFCW Local 1776. She's chair of the IUF LGBTQ+ group, among many other leadership positions. Michelle's openness, her collaborative and visionary spirit is a huge reason why we're here today, folks. Michelle's a thoughtful mentor, active listener, and an all-around change maker whose work to achieve LGBTQ equality in the labor movement has led to incredible gains for workers, for our union, and for LGBTQ+ justice. Thank you, Michelle, for everything you do and your leadership to UFCW Outreach. Now over to you.
Well, I think I'm going to cry, so I'm not sure I can go. So anyway, greetings, friends. Welcome to UFCW Outreach's webinar, Why the UFCW Matters to LGBTQ+ workers. I'm out and proud Michelle Kessler, Secretary Treasurer of UFCW Local 1776, based in the great Biden state of Pennsylvania, and my pronouns are she, her. First, I want to dedicate this event to Bill Alwell, an out gay man who was president of a retail clerks local in the Seattle area in the 1960s and 70s, and eventually rose to the executive committee of our international union. We stand on his and many other shoulders tonight. Slide. And do another slide. Okay, one more slide. There we go. Outreach, our LGBTQ and allies constituency group, was created in 2013, and we've been moving and grooving ever since. We have an outstanding and diverse executive board of UFCW rank and file members and staff, some of whom you'll meet tonight. Doing this survey was risky. The results could have been embarrassing to us all, but we embraced truth to power. We wanted to find out about our impact. We wanted to find out what UFCW members wanted us to focus on. We wanted to know what areas we needed to improve to continue to build the most inclusive union in the US and Canada. That's why we did the survey. That's why we analyzed the data. And that's why we're here tonight. Slide. We're excited to share with you our results that confirm what we hoped to know, that a union, specifically the UFCW, is very valuable for LGBTQ+ workers. We make a difference. Our results show our visibility, negotiations, training, and advocacy is noticed and appreciated by our members, both LGBTQ+ and not. We also found out we must continue to increase our challenges to discrimination everywhere, to make sure our LGBTQ members know we have their backs, and ensure our workplaces are zero tolerance to discrimination, period. So on this slide, you're going to see our website address. If you visit our website, You can download this report, or you can order a copy to be mailed to you. We're also going to be mailing these out to all local unions this month. As always, check out our social media, especially our Facebook page, also Instagram and Twitter, to stay updated on our work. 3 more quick things. First, a commercial. Stay tuned for registration information for a virtual education to better represent our transgender members on March 16th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Our presenter is Dr. Eli Green from the Transgender Training Institute. He rocks virtual education. Our entire 1776 staff, both field staff and admin, went through one of his trainings last fall, and he was absolutely fantastic. And a big thank you to our report partners at the UCLA Labor Center. Yana Shadak Hernandez, who's with us tonight, Saba Wahi, who's going to be one of our presenters tonight, Sophia Angelis, who's with us tonight, Sid Jordan, and Lucera Herrera, who spent the last 2 years working with us with great patience and total commitments. Thank you so much. And most importantly, thank you to our UFCW rank and file members who took the time to do our survey, write comments, and participate in interviews. I'm pleased to pass the torch to the amazing Emmanuel Lopez Bastos from UFCW Canada, tonight's moderator and important part of the report's research team. Take it away, Emma.
Thanks, Michelle. As you can see, we have an incredible lineup of presenters who will share report findings from their unique perspectives. Each presenter will introduce themselves and reflect on what it will take to build a culture of acceptance and inclusion in the workplace. Can you share what it will take to build a culture of acceptance and inclusion at work? You can do so in the chat. 3 to 5 words is all we need. So now over to our first poll on community. Check all that apply. Next slide, please. We'll leave it on for a few seconds. Okay, thank you very much. Let's close the poll. Oh, wow, very good. 93% have friends or family members who are LGBTQ, 93% have coworkers, 34% consider yourself to be LGBTQ, and 6% consider yourself to be intersex, transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. Thank you very much. Now over to our first presenter, Saba Wahid. Thank you, Saba.
Great. Thank you so much, Emma. Hi, everybody. So my name is Saba Wahid, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the research director at the UCLA Labor Center, and we're so honored and excited to have been partners on this project with UFCW Outreach and working with the amazing team over there. I know Michelle already mentioned our partners, but I really am a stand-in for an entire team that did include Yana, Sid, Lucero, Sophia. And I also wanted to shout out that the director of the UCLA Labor Center is hanging out in our audience, Kent, if you want to say a hello in the chat to all of our attendees and panelists. And I think that just shows to us and to you all how important it was for the UCLA Labor Center to be a part of this project. When 2 years ago, Outreach came to us and asked if we were interested, it was such an easy yes. You know, we came back, and I think even before, like, Yana came back, and I think even before she finished the sentence, it was like, yes, like, we really want to do this. We've had a lot, like, the Labor Center has had a long relationship with UFCW. And then to, like, think and work on issues of labor and unions with this intersectional lens was so important for the Labor Center. So again, it was a part of our mission. It is the way that we want to be talking about these issues. And at the end of the day, there's not a lot of research about this. And so we also knew that there's a huge gap in our research world and in our movement world about talking about these multi-layers of who we are. So, you know, to take the first of many, this is the first and only binational study of LGBTQ workers in union workplaces. It is one of the few that even covers the intersection of LGBTQ workers and unions. So already it was cutting edge. You know, with the leadership of UFCW Outreach, the board and members, we were able to collect over 1,000 surveys. And we actually were on a webinar last week with York University, and you can, like, how many people were like so impressed that we were able to collect 1,000 surveys and to collect it of union members. It just shows, like, you know, both the kind of labor that went into putting this project together, and also what you have here doesn't exist in any other place. No one has seen the extent of this kind of research. So I really feel like you all should be congratulating yourself on prioritizing this issue and bringing this data together. So slide. So who did we survey? So let's look at actually the 1,000 folks. So, you know, first, it was really great that it included both LGBTQ plus and non-LGBTQ plus workers. It was all rank and file folks. And it really gives a snapshot of how workers more broadly are viewing this issue. And, you know, just like, it's amazing how much, like, even the poll matches a lot of our findings. You know, whether or not you identified as LGBTQ plus, you have members, you have family members, you have friends, you have coworkers. And so this really became, like, this was such a strong finding for us because it showed how this issue impacts all of us, you know, that we're not just talking about, you know, a select group of folks, but actually we are talking about our workplaces, we are talking about our neighborhoods, we are talking about our families, our communities. And kind of actually similar to the poll, we had almost a third, and we have a little bit over a third on this webinar, identified as LGBTQ plus. So just to quickly tell you a little bit about how we're using the terminology. So LGBTQ plus was to the plus is basically there because we know that there are a lot of ways that you can identify. So 28% said LGBTQ plus. When we looked kind of even further down into that, a third of the folks said identified as gay, a quarter as bisexual. Some folks wrote queer, pansexual, lesbian, asexual, and so on. So for us, the plus kind of recognizes that we wrote in LGBTQ to kind of hold this community, but that there are a lot of ways that folks identify. But overall, we're talking about 28% of the folks that we surveyed. And then the other question, and we had 6% on this call and 9% in our survey, is ITNB plus. And similarly, the plus to really capture the many ways that folks can identify their gender. And in this, the I being intersex, transgender, non-binary. And the ways that within that 9%, the way some folks had basically described themselves, 1/3 being non-binary, a 10th said that they identified as trans men, a 10th as trans woman, 7% gender fluid, others had said also non-binary, gender non-conforming, and so on. And again, the plus. So as you see our findings, you will see LGBTQ plus and ITNB plus in the results. And then finally, just quickly, like, you know, this was a binational study. A third of the results came from Canada. It was spread out across the US. We were definitely stronger on the kind of Western side of the country, but also got surveys from Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast. Probably like where we under-surveyed was more towards the South and some parts of the Midwest. But nonetheless, it was a national, binational study and really robust, a robust set of findings. Also hitting most of the industries, you know, getting folks from, you know, a diverse set of ages, national origin, race and ethnicity. So we really we got everybody, like everybody who really we want to hear from when we're talking about union workers and how folks are thinking about LGBTQ plus issues. So next slide. So let's go into the findings. I'm gonna go through finding number 1, which is our first finding was UFCW is basically leading the way in terms of fighting for LGBTQ plus rights. And what does that mean? So we'll go to the next slide. First was one of the things we looked at was Pride. Annual events where there's public events, to really create visibility for LGBTQ plus people, and having the union participate in Pride, allowed both for visibility for LGBTQ plus workers within the union and workplace, but also then to show LGBTQ plus spaces that the union is there also in terms of visibility and support, and also for allies to be able to support their families and community members. So if you look at the next slide, you'll see that specifically those who identified as LGBTQ plus said that they went to celebrate their own identity. But then the other 2 points was that they went in order to basically, they saw Pride as a tool for political advocacy and social change, and also because it was a part of union solidarity. And for those who were allies, they went, not necessarily for themselves, but to support their family, friends, and coworkers. And then you see even for them, which was higher, was that it was for union solidarity. And so really seeing how the union leadership in Pride participation, how it opens up all these kinds of outlets for both LGBTQ plus people and for their allies, as well as creating visibility for within LGBTQ plus spaces, broader spaces, where a lot of times they're not thinking about workers. So that's really important. So in the next slide, we asked survey participants what should be the priorities when it comes to organizing for LGBTQ plus issues. And there was a bunch of different options. And so these were the top ones that showed up. And so, one of the things was really about including anti-discrimination language in CBAs. And we'll have folks talk more about this in the next finding. But then the other things were also training and then supporting our trans community, especially in regards to things like healthcare and bathroom access. All these are super important when it comes to thinking about, what members are directing us in terms of, what is a worker-centered and worker-focused direction in terms of, what are like issues to be prioritizing when we're thinking about organizing within this community. And then kind of moving into the next slide. So what will it take? So, what we really saw was how important these issues are and how the union is already taking steps. But what do we need to do to address some of the systemic issues that still exist? And so there was a bunch of recommendations that came from interviews, from survey responses about what we should be doing. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So using political power, right? So using the political power in terms of endorsing candidates, LGBTQ plus candidates, or those that have platforms, LGBTQ plus rights as their platform, defeating anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. And when you all get a report, whether you get the hard copy or go online, you'll see there was actually a bunch of really great examples of how UFCW has already been doing that kind of work. Doing trainings, what does it mean for visibility? So Pride was one example, but folks talked about a lot of other things like posters, like gender pronouns on name tags, how can we use more inclusive language? So there's a lot of things that can be done both within our unions, within the union agenda, as well as within the workplace. And that kind of goes to some more stuff that came up in terms of suggestions, which is that the policies matter, the kinds of policies that are set up at the workplace. So, having non-discriminatory trainings and policies. What are the grievance procedures? We'll see data about that in terms of like what happens when there's like some kind of attack on an LGBTQ plus person in the workplace, and how to address that. how to build more equity into hiring. And then also like when we're talking about who's the expert and who can be in leadership positions, like creating outreach chapters, as well as like who can be in leadership positions within the union and beyond. And then assessing, like making sure that we are looking back at how we're doing on these things. You know, the report really gives us a baseline, and then, you know, where do we want to move up from there? So those were some of the key findings from us. So I am going to pass it on to Felicia Miller to provide a firsthand perspective on the power of engaging politics in LGBTQ+ activism. Felicia.
Hi, my name is Felicia Miller, and I am with UFCW Local 400. I work for Safeway. I'm a deli clerk. I've been with Safeway for 37 years, and my pronouns are she, her. So getting to that, 75% of union members agree that our unions take action on political agendas, such as the Obama era. My state of Virginia, we were red, we went purple, and now we're blue due to the actions of Local 400. Also, by them releasing me out of my store, which is Safeway, I contact members about voting and also about which candidates that the union supports. Slide. 83% of our members said our union leaders support our issues. And in that, just 12321, our Governor Northam here in Virginia passed the first in the nation bill for permanent workplace protection standards. And then also last year, sponsored by Virginia Senator Ebens, he passed Senate Bill 868, which was called the Values Act, which Governor Northam also passed. It was the first state in the South to pass such a bill. It was comprehensive. It was a comprehensive protection bill for LGBTQ+. What it did is no discrimination in housing, no discrimination in employment, no discrimination in public spaces, and no discrimination on credit applications. And 78% of our members agree we need more LGBT political candidates, such as Danica Roem. She was the first trans elected in my state. And then, of course, this year, presidential candidate Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who was just confirmed as transportation secretary. And with that said, slide. We generally support people who are good with workers' rights, but pro-LGBTQ+ would be wonderful as well if our representatives doesn't see you for who you are. How can they represent you accurately? And I'll pass it back to Emma.
Thank you, Saba, for your research insights. And thank you, Felicia, for your perseverance and firsthand perspective, not only in sharing some of the report findings with us, but also in situating how important it is to fight for LGBTQ inclusion through political advocacy. Now, you've heard a lot in a short period of time, so let's go to our next poll on priorities. Next slide, please. Okay. So what are 2 areas in your current work or life where you feel that labor, UFCW can make an impact for LGBTQ workers? Okay. Close the poll. Yeah, this definitely is synonymous with survey findings. Anti-discrimination language and training for staff and members comes out on top. Incredible. So now let's go on and learn some more, this time from our wonderful John Woods. Take it away, John.
Good evening, sisters, brothers, friends, and allies. My name is John Woods. I am a 30-year staff member with UFCW Local 1500 in New York, out and proud since 2013 after the formation of Outreach, and my pronouns are he, him. So what I want to talk to you about is the key finding number 2, which is union contracts and education protection and empowering LGBTQ plus workers through non-discrimination language in your contracts. So I want to start off by giving a hypothetical situation. Your name is John and you work for the ABC Corporation or ABC Company, and you go into work on Monday morning and the manager or boss calls you into the office and says that, hey, John, I saw on Facebook that you had a Sunday fun day with your boyfriend. We didn't know you were gay here. That doesn't work for the ABC Company. We want you to clean out your locker and your office and go home. So we're going to put up a poll. How many people think that is legal? Okay, I think everyone's had enough to respond. So 72% of you said no, and 28% of you said yes. So let's go to the next slide. So this is a state of the obviously a map of the United States, I'm sorry. Every square state that is gray, that scenario on a state level is perfectly legal. There is no protection for workers on a state level. Now, since the federal level, since the Supreme Court case Babcock and President Biden has signed some LGBT protections, there are some pathways for LGBT workers to pursue on a federal level. But on a state level, it's 100% legal, which is why LGBT workers and non-discrimination language in their union contracts is so important. Slide. This is a clause in our contracts in New York. The employer and the union agree that they will not discriminate against any employee because of race, color, religion, union affiliation, age, sex, orientation, sexual orientation, disability, national origin, genetic information, or gender identity or expression. So this language, I would have to say, unfortunately, prior to the formation of Outreach, we didn't have it in many contracts. But I'm proud to say in 2020, almost 100% of our contracts now have this non-discrimination language in our contracts. And believe it or not, it was not hard to do. It was one of the most easiest things from a negotiation standpoint, with the employers did not push back too much on getting this language in the contract. So it shows that the union is supportive of LGBT members. And slide, please, I'm sorry. So one of the key findings that we found out that the collective bargaining protection is that 68% of participants in the survey feel that workers, because of the contract of protection, are protected in their union contract, I'm sorry. So LGBTQ workers should be protected by the union contract. 87% of the participants agreed, and LGBT workers are protected by the union contract. Only 70% agreed. So, what did that kind of show us? It showed us that there was some educational problems there because they didn't know that it was there, but they agreed that it should be. Slide. So participants said that knowing that the union was negotiating for explicit language in their contract was a powerful demonstration of the union's commitment to LGBTQ people. Was important. So more on the educational piece, non-discrimination protection based on sexual orientation. 61% of participants agreed, 11% said no, and 28% didn't know. Non-discrimination protection based on gender identity or expression, 60% said yes, 11% said no, and 29% didn't know. So this is more, about what is in their contract. So if you see the slide here, it runs around 28 to 29% of people that didn't know, which is, just a key for us that when we need to educate our members more, not just on LGBT plus issues, but, on everything that they should know what is in their union contracts. Slide. So responding to anti-LGBT discrimination, 60% of people said that they would talk to a coworker. Only 41% that they informed management. 29% said they would talk to a union representative. 7% said they would use a company hotline, and only 8% said they would file the grievance. Slide. So this has to do with equitable access to workplace benefits, meaning like for transgender. And I'm proud to say that at our convention that we passed that in the international benefits that inclusive of trans healthcare. So that's its analysis that they show that the benefits of this is equitable for LGBT workers, even though Trump made it worse by proposing to eliminate transgender inclusion in the ACA, and the outreach actually testified that this elimination is not good for, obviously, for transgender workers. Next. And now I would like to pass it off to the Vice Chair of Outreach, Laura Kelly.
Thank you, John. My name is Laura Kelly. I am a proud union representative at Local 655 out of St. Louis, Missouri. I sit as the co-chair of Outreach, and I sit as the chairperson for our education program, which we are very proud of. We're going to go over some slides that highlight why education is so important. So providing workplace my pronouns are she, her, my apologies. Providing workplace education on LGBTQ plus equity. If we look at this, training was provided for 64% of our participants by the union, 53% by the employer, and 35% from outside organizations. 35% of the participants in our survey received LGBTQ plus inclusion training at the workplace. The union had the highest amount though, so that makes us very proud of that. We want to keep moving that number forward. To date, UFCW Outreach has led over 100 trainings across the US and Canada. And I want to share with you the top 3 things educational participants care about when they take part in this training. The first is being a safe space or providing a safe space for LGBTQ plus workers, understanding the difference between sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And the last one is allyship and advocacy, how they can truly show support for all other union members. Slide. On this slide here, you will see that the percent of trained members is much higher than the percent of untrained members for the 4 things that we asked. Knew that their CBA had or did not have protections against discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. 74% of trained members knew, 51% of untrained members. Informed management about anti-LGBTQ plus discrimination among those who observed it, 45% of trained members, 34% of untrained members. Talk to a union rep about anti-LGBTQ plus discrimination, 41% of trained members, 19% of untrained members. Filed a grievance about anti-LGBTQ plus discrimination, 11% of trained members, and 4% of untrained members. We can see the vast difference between the trained members and the untrained members on these 4 particular items. Union-led workplace trainings have the power to ensure that workers understand existing LGBTQ plus protections in their CBA, that's what John was talking about, and options for engaging the union in response to LGBTQ plus discrimination and harassment. The broader impact, training can shift values and attitudes about LGBTQ plus rights. Participants, LGBTQ plus or not, demonstrate more awareness and responsiveness to anti-LGBTQ plus discrimination at work and for us as union reps. Also, it made it more likely that anyone facing LGBTQ plus discrimination at their workplace would speak with their union representative. We have to remember that constructive and sometimes restorative dialogue can only begin when we're all at the same table. Education and communication go hand in hand. And I'm going to steal part of the quote from the political part as an intersection with this. If your representative doesn't know who you are, how can they represent you adequately? Slide. Participants said that formal training alleviates the pressure of having to informally provide education for coworkers or management. That can be a very uncomfortable situation for some folks. Quote, more materials presented for people that don't identify as LGBTQ+, because I remember a lot of people would come to me with questions and I would be their go-to person for these kinds of issues, end quote. Next quote, the more education and training, the better. To hold people responsible for their actions, I feel very proud and safe to work for ABC, knowing it's an LGBTQ+ safe workplace. These types of responses show us that educational workshops that widen the circle of accountability is absolutely a first step in fostering a work environment where LGBTQ workers can feel safe and heard. LGBTQ workers highlighted the need for training and education as a priority. If you remember earlier, it was 50%. In the second poll, I believe it was up in the 60% that Emma put up. Some participants provided suggestions on how to foster an environment which respects the use of pronouns, access to washrooms, does not tolerate anti-LGBTQ+ comments from customers, coworkers, or management. So what will it take to build a culture of acceptance and inclusion at work? Slide. The pathways towards union power and justice. Develop issue-based worker-centered organizing and labor education programs that focus on lifting up and affirming LGBTQ+ workers' rights and identities. Education promotes inclusivity and allyship, the two most important items in building a culture of acceptance in our union. Trainings for leadership, stewards, organizers, representatives, and rank and file have become a portal of knowledge, understanding, and acceptance, which will lead us down the pathway towards union power and justice for all. We need not forget our motto, an injury to one is an injury to all. Slide. Pathways towards union power and justice. Gender inclusive culture, model gender neutral language, refraining from assuming gender identity, normalize pronoun sharing, use intersectional analysis and political activity, communications, presentations, training and workshop, identity affirming resource and materials, in other words, LGBTQ+ posters in the office, trainings that highlighted LGBTQ+ movements and leaders, LGBTQ+ education and training for all members. With 64% of our participants receiving their education from the union, this is a great first step in the cultural change that we seek. Our union is a melting pot of many cultures, backgrounds, and identities. It is what makes us beautiful and diverse. Our greatest strengths come from the learning, growing, and understanding of each other. Together, drawing on this strength, we can build a gender inclusive culture where all LGBTQ workers feel represented in the union and in resources and materials about workers' rights. This survey has brought to light where we are, what we've done well, and why we have more work to do in this organization. We will continue our quest to achieve, negotiate, or lead comprehensive LGBTQ+ educational trainings for all leadership, staff, stewards, and rank and file members of this amazing union, making it possible to better represent the needs of our LGBTQ members. I will end my section with a quote from Benjamin Franklin, and I think this encompasses the trainings that I've been talking about. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Back to you, Emma.
Wow. Thank you, John. Thank you, Laura. The issues you've highlighted are critical in establishing workplace protections for LGBTQ+ workers. For me, there were a lot of takeaways from this section. How about for you? So as you know, when I say that, poll number 3. When it comes to acceptance in the workplace, how accepting of LGBTQ+ people is your workplace? Okay. Okay, 69% found their workplace to be very accepting, 26% somewhat accepting, 5% not accepting. Now over to our next presenter to talk about finding number 3, Kim Frost.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Frost. My pronouns are she, her. I work at Local 1102 in New York. I've been here for 15 years. I also have the pleasure of being the treasurer of Outreach. As you see on the screen, there's a sticker, the One Union Together. You can go onto our website at www.ufcwoutreach.com and you can order these and we'll ship them to you for free. Slide. LGBTQINB+ workers perceived acceptance of LGBTQ+ people in the workplace. LGBTQINB+ said the following were very accepting: union staff at 77%, managers at 53%, co-workers at 54%, and customers at 25%. As you see, workers had varying perceptions of LGBTQ+ acceptance in the workplace, with customers coming in the least accepting. Survey results tell us that 46% of coworkers were somewhat accepting to not at all accepting of LGBTQ+ workers. That's really shameful, yet it's a reality that we need to change in workplace equality. If we add somewhat accepting to the union staff number, it brings that number to 97% accepting, of being very accepting. Union staff is a beacon of light in the workplace. And as John and Laura were talking about, training and your contract language, it all comes into play with the union staff. And the survey results at 97% accepting. That's amazing. Slide. Observed or experienced anti-LGBTQ+ discrimination in the workplace in the last 5 years. 72% of LGBTQ+ workers, 85% of ITNB+ workers, and 40% of non-LGBTQ+ workers. That's a total of 49% of all workers. This slide shows us that almost half of all participants observed or experienced some form of anti-LGBTQ+ discrimination or mistreatment at work at least once within the last 5 years. LGBTQ+ workers were more aware of these attitudes, whether or not they were directly targeted. Those are staggering numbers. Slide. Anti-LGBTQ+ discrimination in the workplace. This slide highlights the extent of negative attitudes and how anti-LGBTQ+ discrimination showed up at work. So 43% experienced negative comments, stereotypes, and jokes. 35% referred to by the wrong pronoun. 24% experienced bullying or harassment. 18% experienced sexual objectification or harassment. 13% were asked to dress or present differently. 8% were unfairly disciplined or suspended. 7% were dismissed or denied a promotion. 3% experienced physical violence. In the report, 58% of ITNB were referred to by the wrong pronoun. Slide. Participants feeling unsafe at work. 42% of LGBTQ+ workers felt unsafe at work, and 67% of ITNB+ workers felt unsafe at work. Through this report, we also learned that ITNB workers, that they were most likely to have experienced bullying and harassment at work, with nearly half reporting being misgendered or being referred to by the wrong pronoun. This begs the question, how do we all create a culture of acceptance and inclusion at work? Here's the thing, unless somebody tells you their pronoun, don't assume it. Just ask them. It's very simple. It's a very simple, respectful gesture, and it goes a very long way. Next slide. Participants out at work. 49% of LGBTQ plus workers are out at work, and 33% of ITNB plus workers are out at work. That leaves about 50% of ITNB plus workers that are not out at work at all, or maybe to one person. That's staggering, having to go to work and not be who you are. So fears about being open up at work are that 53% said that they were scared of being stereotyped. 49% were scared of it being perceived as unprofessional. 45% were scared of losing connections. 31% felt unsafe, and 22% felt unwelcomed by a direct supervisor. The survey did show that if people feel comfortable being out at work with coworkers, knowing who they are, their identities, their families, where they could share openly, that LGBTQ plus workers will bring their full selves to work, and that is good for everybody. Slide. Pathways towards social justice recommendations. Create worker-centered safe spaces within the union and affiliated community centers where workers can address, denounce, and resist LGBTQ plus workplace violence, discrimination, and harassment. This is why the UFCW matters. We make a more inclusive workplace for our LGBTQ plus workers. This picture here is my friend Lisa. She works with Felicia at Local 400. I met her at the Creating Change conference, and it was very powerful when we were talking about our experiences of the day. And she said to us that this was the first time ever that she was seen entirely as her full self. And that left such an impact on me, right? That at this point in her life, that was the first time, and we need to change that. Slide. Pathways towards social justice. Streamline reporting for workplace discrimination and harassment. Trainings for all workers on how to address discrimination by customers, coworkers, etc., especially customers, right? Because we know from the findings that customers were the least accepting. Training union reps that includes active listening, courageous conversation, check-ins to resolve conflicts workers raise about discrimination issues. Trainings that highlight LGBTQ plus movements and leaders, such as Laura was telling you about, and continue to expand local and federal legislation to address structural forms of oppression, like Felicia was speaking about at the beginning. So thank you very much, and I'm going to pass it to Emma.
Thank you, Kim, for that wonderful presentation of the findings. And thank you to all our presenters so far. Can we just take a moment to just recognize the immense amount of work that you've done to really showcase and highlight each of these findings and everything we've heard in this survey. I think you hit the nail right on the head, Kim, when you say LGBTQ inclusion is good for everybody. And as well as Laura, when you said training promotes education and allyship, which are pillars of our union. And John reminded us that on a state level, while we may have federal protections on a state level, we have to continuously bargain these protections, not only for our LGBTQ plus workers, but also to establish general equity in the workplace. So if we do all that, what are other considerations we should reflect on in doing this work? The following three speakers will present their perspectives and some practical tips for us. So I pass it over to you, our first presenter, Tanya Liu.
Thanks, Emma. My name is Tanya Liu, and I'm an organizer from Local 1006A in Ontario, Canada. My pronouns are she, her. I'm also the chair of our local outreach chapter. So let me tell you about a friend of mine, Dave. Dave works at a place in Toronto's Gay Village. He used to work in remote communities in northern Quebec, and he understands injustice very well. So now he's working in the service industry in the village at one of the known queer-friendly places to work at. Most of the workers there are gay men. One day, a colleague of his came in with light makeup and painted nails. And then this colleague was sent home by the manager for his gender expression, for being too feminine. That was not the first time queer workers were treated poorly and discriminated against for who they are. But that was the time Dave decided to start talking to his colleagues and seek respect and fairness through unionization. In 2017, Bill C-16 added gender identity and gender expression to the Human Rights Act and protections under the Criminal Code of Canada. Yet LGBTQ+ Canadians are still discriminated on a daily basis. How? By not being allowed to be their true selves at work, like Dave's colleague. By not having access to medical doctors who can understand their concerns. By being shut out from workplace benefits and access to what remains as patchy gender affirming care across the country. It's not too long ago when a study cited that transgender Canadians make an average of $15,000 or less per year. As union organizers, we carry a huge task, and that is to grow our union and in turn work to achieve fairness at work for too many workers like Dave, whose income come from marginally secure jobs, that come from working gig jobs, and from multiple part-time jobs. So what are some of the actions we can take? When we're organizing, workers are more likely to do something. We are more likely to do something if we're convinced to do so by a friend or a loved one than by a person who we don't know at all. That's especially true for LGBTQ+ workers. So we are already in the community. We know our communities. Remember Dave? A mutual friend introduced us to each other, and that's how he found UFCW. In the first poll, 93% of you said you have families and friends that are LGBTQ+. So we can build on that relationship we have, organize them and improve working conditions for queer workers and all workers. Also, we have to understand workers and our members are as whole people, not simply as workers. We're here to engage whole workers in the betterment of their lives. They may be in a precarious position at work. They also might be facing housing issues as a queer person. They might have challenges getting healthcare. We can expand their vision and raise their expectations, from making things better for themselves at work, to their immediate peers in their unit, to their shift, their workplace, their street, their kids' school, their community, their country, and their world. A third action we can take. I mentioned I'm the chair of our local outreach chapter. So you can create your own local outreach chapter. Local 1006A, our outreach committee, is where the members get together, discuss issues they face at work and in their communities, where we organize to improve working conditions by creating gay-straight alliances, where we work to make our union even more inclusive by building allyship, and where we effect changes politically. And we also participate in a number of Pride festivals across the province. So that's all from me. Next, I'll pass it on to Nikki to talk about what are the actions you can take as a union organizer. Union representative.
Thank you, Tanya. My name is Nikki Regano, and I'm a union representative in Columbus, Ohio with Local 1059. I've been a union rep for almost 8 years now, but prior to that, I did work in retail establishments for about 22 years. One of the things that I noticed, it was really troubling to me in the study, was that only 29% of our members who took the survey and had seen, discrimination for LGBTQ+, reported it to their union rep. That bothered me. It really bothered me. I think that there's some very small things that we can do to make some changes in our work sites. The first one is a very small, simple one. I have an outreach pin that I wear, and I wear this pin every single day. It's very small. It's the bare minimum that I can do. And it's something that I feel very strongly about because people see me and they know immediately that I'm a safe person to talk to. And by extension, the union is a safe place for them. I also have stickers that we have from outreach. They're pronoun stickers. And I pass those out when, people see me wearing mine and they ask, where did you get that sticker? Well, guess what? I have a few left over right here. Let me give you one. So I do wear those every single day because that is the bare minimum, but we need to do more than the bare minimum. And another thing that we can do then is to call out discrimination when we see it in the work sites or when we hear about it in the work sites, whether it's members or whether it's management. It needs to be called out and it needs to be taken care of immediately and effectively. I think that a big part of that is also empowering our stewards and making sure we're putting the right people in steward positions, because our stewards need to know that they actually have to represent everyone. They cannot throw things by the wayside or think, oh, well, that was just a one-off. Well, he didn't mean what he said. No, our stewards need to be empowered and they need to know that it's okay for them to approach management about problems and that they have the full backing of the union reps. So I think that that's a very important key part of this. In regards to, them feeling like, the reps have their backs, I can tell you from experience, when I worked in retail in the stores, I had a customer who threatened my actual physical safety. It was brought to the attention of my manager at the time, and the manager, we asked, hey, will you do something about this? And the response was, well, we'll think about it. That was shocking to me, and it was soul crushing. But the first thing I did was to pick up the phone and call my union rep, because I knew that if anyone was going to have my back, it was going to be my union rep. And how did I know that? Because he had spoken with me and listened to me, and he got to know me. So getting to know your members through your stewards, through being visible, those are key things that will help propel us forward. Another thing, and it's a very easy one, is to publicize that the union is a safe place. Make it known, talk about it. I have flyers about, LGBTQ issues in the workplace that outreach has printed up. I pass those out. I hand those to every one of my stewards. I talk about the Creating Change Conference scholarships that outreach offers. And I talk about pride marches and I invite people out. I pass out our stickers. So I make sure that, I'm actually doing everything I can to make outreach known, to make myself known, and to make it very clear that, we're not going to stand for any problems in the workplace. The union does have your back. So those are just a few things that I feel like, as a rep, that we can do in our work sites. And with that, I guess I'll toss it on over to Sean.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. My name is Sean Kavanagh. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of Local 3 of the RWDSU/UFCW for 10 years, he, him. And so what are some of the actions that a union leader can do? Number one, I would think, is become a role model. I have been out to my family for a very long time. I was out at work. I'm out to my union family. I live my authentic life. Any of you who may have met me either at an RWDSU or UFCW meeting or conference or convention probably know my partner, Jay, because I make it a point to invite him as my guest. I walk in the footsteps of some great leaders. We honor Bill Orwell, who stood his ground despite the bigotry and over-discrimination that he endured. And look at us today. We have an LGBTQ person at the top of the UFCW executive leadership. Stuart Applebaum, the president of the Retail, Wholesale and Department Store Union. We need to be visible, we need to be explicit, and we need to be intentional. You can never underestimate the value of visibility. Number two, negotiate protective language, like John was talking about. Local 3, we had protective language. Sexual orientation was the first, and then we went to gender identity and gender expression. These are protective language that's very important. The thing with discrimination is that it always leads to further discrimination if it goes unchecked. We also in 2012 negotiated paternity leave. So if a man has a child, goes out on the same 9 months of paternity leave, it's about equality. This year, we're going to go and back to the table, and we're seeking gender neutral bathrooms. So we'll see how far we go with that. For some reason, that becomes a real issue. Number 3 is support outreach and encourage chapters. Outreach is the resource for any material or information you need to know about LGBTQ plus issues. It is the resource. So make sure that people take advantage of it. I mean, it's there. Also, we make sure that we participate in gay pride events, and we make sure that we use social media. Again, that visibility is very, very important. And then we support our elected officials and candidates who have our best interests in mind. What can we do in conclusion to move the bar on workplace inclusion? So 1, remember your union values and work toward achieving non-discrimination protection in all contracts. Remember the power of visibility and embrace opportunities for celebration. And this one, Laura, you're gonna love. Train, 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 and train some more. Knowledge is power. We are human. We make mistakes. Own our mistakes, apologize, and move on. Train to figure out ways to incorporate this into workplace conversations. And with that, I'll give it over to Emma.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone, each one of you. Now we're at the Q&A portion of our webinar, and I understand that there are a couple of folks, at least one folk, who may want to ask their question live. So I will put myself on mute and maybe leave it to the experts to take it from there.
So I see we have 2 people who have their hand up. Let's see. Kayla, you had your hand up from pretty early on, so I'm going to unmute you. So if you want to, oops, where did you go? Sophia, can you help me out here? Here, ask to unmute. Nope. And now I can't see. Okay, maybe it's not working.
Maybe she put her hand down. Or here. We could do Glenn.
Glenn, are you able to unmute and ask your question or give a comment? We saw that your hand is up. Nope. Okay. Maybe we'll just wait. All right. So Sophia put this in the chat. So there's a few ways. If you can put your hand up and we can take your question live if you want to have a conversation with our panelist. Or the other thing is that we do have this Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and you can type in a question. or put it in chat. So any of these options are available. So if you raise your hand, we'll unmute you.
Does it make sense for us to start with a question to our panelists?
Yeah, why don't
Okay.
you start? Yeah.
Okay, so as we wait for the question section to populate, I'm curious, do any panelists have any personal reflections on what being part of outreach has meant to you?
Can I jump in here, Emma?
Yes, please.
Okay, so for me, I was able to be out, and I can't begin to tell you how much that means. I came to the UFCW in 1986 and basically hid a really big part of myself. It's kind of actually a little bit embarrassing to admit that here I am out there being a labor leader, yet I'm not admitting who I am. And the creation of outreach gave me that opportunity to feel the union had my back. I came out in 2013. I got married a couple months later and I shared it all on Facebook. I can't be much more out, and it's fabulous. It's so liberating, and I wish this for everyone. And that's what motivates me every day to do this work, so that everyone can have this feeling.
Emma, we have a question in the chat. Do you have best practices information guide for union reps?
Michelle?
I think Laura's going to go.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry, yes. So we have a trifold brochure on how to deal with LGBTQ issues in the workplace. It is a great tool to have in your car, in your hand. If you memorize it, that's even better. But it gives great tips and some information that all representatives should have, especially if they're not comfortable yet, or if they need to know more information about it. So yes, we do have those, and those can be ordered, I believe, from Michelle. Yes?
They can, and we have them in Spanish, French, and English.
Yes, thank you.
Some more questions. Are there plans to do a follow-up survey? This one comes from Diana O'Brien.
I think Emma should answer that question.
I think we've got a lot of work to do to profile the findings of this report. But definitely, I think that, you know, in a long-term perspective, let's work on some of the recommendations that were established by this report, but remain mindful that accountability means holding our own selves accountable as a union, and not taking for granted that, you know, just because we're union reps, we automatically know how to address anti-LGBTQ sentiment in the stores, but working really hard to make workplaces safer, and then retesting, resurveying. Thank you for asking that question. Another question came in: how do we ensure people know what discrimination looks like? For example, would a trans member who is not called by their legal government name have a right to get the correct name on their name tag?
I had the situation whenever I was a steward at Shop and Save, and I went to management and talked to management about a person was Mark, and they wanted to be known as Marissa. I went and spoke with management, and I also called my union, not my representative, but somebody else that I knew from the union hall. And we had a conversation about it, and management actually got the name tag for them, no questions asked. And I can't tell you how happy that union partner was of ours that came back with that name tag that morning and told me how much it meant to her to have that name on her name tag. And it still makes me, you know, tear up a little bit now, because I had no idea the impact. And I think that that's the whole part of learning process, is you don't know what you can do. And it may be something as small as getting a name tag to me, but it was huge, huge to Marissa. So I would suggest talking to management, finding out what company policy is on that. And if there's an issue, contact your union representative. And if they need help with that, reach out to us. We are here.
Thank
I'd like
you
to
so
agree
much.
with, I'd like
Yeah.
to just tag on to that. It really is simple to make the ask if you're the union rep. It's very simple. When the member doesn't feel comfortable, who can they turn to? If you make yourself known that you are approachable and you're accessible, because I actually had a member, I service very rural areas. And in the rural areas, it's not always accepted to be LGBTQ. Member came up to me and said, you know, I need to change my name tag. I need to make sure people know, but I'm afraid. How do I do this? Not a problem. I don't think it'll be a problem, but I will go with you. So I've gone in with 2 separate people now into 2 different locations to actually make the ask accompanied by the member, because I wanted them to be able to look at the manager in the face and see that this is a human being and they're making a very simple ask to be themselves at work. They just want to be who they are. And having that union rep stand next to that individual, not only did it let that person know that, you know, you've got their back, but management now sees them as who they really are. And I agree with Laura, that's huge to see someone who is able to completely just own who they are in the workplace and know that management's on board with it. Whether they wanted to be or not, management was on board with it immediately.
I want to share a similar story on name tags if everyone can allow me. So similar to the other 2 stories, I had one of my shops with the member's name was Daniela, as far as the company knew. But Daniela, when she was coming to work, she would stop at the Dunkin' Donuts and she changed into Daniel. And her family did not know her as Daniel, and she wanted to have Daniel on his name tag. So management wouldn't let them do that. So like Nikki said, it was a simple ask. We have non-discrimination language in our contract. Her gender expression is Daniel, and getting her the Daniel on the name tag, getting him the Daniel on the name tag was the most important thing for her. But when I found out about it, and this is the touching story about it, at our local union, we don't do a genital check. So when I said to him, would you like your name as far as the union to be turned to be Daniel? And he broke down and cried because I was able to change his name to Daniel, and he has a union card with his Daniel on it. And that was the first piece of information, ID, any type of that identified him as Daniel. And it's made such an impact in his life. It was amazing. And I almost broke down and cried in the store when the way this individual was so appreciative of the union to do that for him.
Emma, did you see the question in the chat?
I see 3 other questions. One
there was
of
one that I sent directly to you that came from Glenn, because Glenn was trying to raise their hand earlier. So if you don't mind,
no, I'm sorry, please.
I just put it in the chat for you. Or I'll just read it out loud and then folks
Yes,
can
please.
answer. Sure, no problem. Okay. It's cumbersome getting it's cumbersome getting hormone blockers for teen daughter who came out as trans female. By the time we met all the state and insurance requirements, my daughter was almost through puberty. So I don't know if anyone wants to respond to kind of health access for trans folks.
I'll jump in on this one. So I'd like to know more about that, maybe offline. We could talk about that. It's one of the things that we've been working hard on since the beginning of outreach to help local unions understand the importance of eliminating the exclusions that have been historically in all health plans. And when President Obama did the ACA and put language in there to make it discriminatory, it's the the piece that John was talking about, where we gave testimony because the Trump administration decided to pull out the part of the law where you could discriminate, which meant you didn't have to offer trans inclusive benefits. I'd like to know more about your situation offline, because that is something we work towards. Not every health plan that there is has trans inclusive benefits, but that's what we need to work on together to, to get there. It's not an overnight getting all this done, but the progress we've made has been absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, that's a very important question. And trans healthcare benefits have been a very important issue to us. We really aggressively started taking on advocacy on trans inclusion and healthcare, gender affirming care back in 2014, and have made some strides. And if you run into situations that outreach can certainly support, we are accessible and contact information is on the website. Now, one of the questions that came in is, how do you deal with discrimination against LGBTQ plus coming out members from other equity seeking groups? So how do you deal with the discrimination when it comes from members of other equity seeking groups? Anyone want to take that on?
I can, yeah, yes. Yes, that happens. I would say education is the most important, and also to get together and share our experiences. Since it's coming from other equity-seeking groups, we think we all face our own challenges, but a lot of them are shared. There's intersection for sure. We just may not have heard about each other's experiences. So we can, get together, share our own experience, share our own stories, and find our common core value. I imagine Glacier is talking about the union activists from other equity-seeking groups. So we are all activists. We are all in the union. We're all working towards a common goal. We just need to hear each other's struggle, and think from the other perspective.
Anyone else? Thank you, Tanya. And I think like no identity is a monolith, right? So like even we see the ever expanding LGBTQI2S acronym that we use in Canada, and LGBTQI identities are diverse and beautiful and expansive. And as we create more language to better understand the experience of each other in the workplace, I think that we need to look at oppression through the lens of no identity is ever just like LGBTQI. You are immigrant, you are whatever else you bring to the workplace. So I think being open to looking at also Tanya's comment, the whole person. But very good question. Thank you so much for asking that, Glacier. Are there any other questions that came up?
If I could, Emma, while we have a lull here. So if anyone's interested in becoming a member or supporting outreach, if you go to our website, you can get membership there. And those people who might have been admiring the pins that a lot of us are wearing, we'll mail you a pin. And while I'm doing this shameless plug, we're also sending out masks for everyone too. So you'll be on our email list. We'll keep you up to date with what's going on. And you'll be supporting, I hope, what you found tonight is an important mission that we're on, and we'd love to have you all join us in our work.
Thank you, Michelle. And I see a question from Brian Van Pelt. Is there outreach to other unions as well? Sharing of information, gaps close with information, education, and solidarity. Knowledge is power, and learning from others. Best practices is the best. And I've heard bunches of best practices tonight, so thanks for the opportunity to attend. So are we sharing this information with other unions?
if I could. So the AFL-CIO actually sent out the link for our report to all unions across the US. And I think in Canada, we've been doing that too. We've done a couple webinars. We have a couple more webinars coming up. And I think we're partners in the organization called Pride at Work here in the United States, which is part of the constituency group for LGBT in the AFL-CIO, and I plan to share all this information with them. So in fact, we have some folks from Pride at Work on the call tonight.
And in Canada, UFCW Canada has established a national partnership with EGAL. So sharing that information with EGAL Human Rights Trust is really important to us. We've also done a webinar with the Global Labor Research Center just last week at York University in Toronto. We center our work with the Voice of Labor, the Canadian Labour Congress. So sharing that information with human rights folks through that lens as well is very important to keep everyone informed and to learn from each other's struggles. So thank you, Glenn, for bringing that forward.
There was a question in the chat if Biden has brought some of these protections back.
Yes, and he's committed to bring back a lot more. And we've been on some calls already about potentially getting the Equality Act passed here in the first 6 months of this presidency. So we have a lot of hope. So yes, I think my understanding is all these protections that were eliminated during the Trump administration, in due time, they will all be back.
We still have a little bit more time, a few more minutes left on this webinar. If anyone wants to make any comments, any of the panelists have something that they would like to share, or another takeaway for participants, please do so at this time.
So I guess I'll say that, you know, when we first started this, I wasn't 100% like what the results were going to be. And when we got the results and reading the report, it was really staggering to me, some of the numbers and how many people and how many LGBTQ people are not out at work. You know, sometimes I feel like I live in a little bit of a bubble, like, right, I'm out and my family, you know, knows, and you don't realize that, and you're so accepting of everybody. So you don't even think there's that out there still. And it really hit me pretty hard when, I mean, some of those numbers, like 50% of ITMB people are not out at work. Like, that's really hard. And it just makes me, as a union activist and as a fellow LGBTQ plus person, want to work harder to make sure that that is not the case. And if we do that through our union stewards, or if we do that through the training like Laura was talking about, and the discrimination clauses in the contracts, and just making sure that we get the word out, and that we fight for those rights just as hard as the people who are dealing with it in the stores. I think that's really important. And that really hit me very hard, that, you know, to go to work and not be your authentic self, that's horrible. And I want to change that, you know. So the report was eye-opening, right? And I think it was a great job by everybody on our team here who worked on it. I was just happy to be able to participate, but you guys did a lot of hard work, and it really shows. And UCLA, you did a great job also. So thank you, and that's my thought.
Thank you so much, Kim. I think reports like this demystify, you know, how much we often hang on to making sure that the government knows that they are responsible to create all of these changes. But the reality is that there are things that we can, actions that we can take at our level every day, you know, to show that we are a safe person, that we are a safe space for others, including the simplicity of just wearing our outreach pins or any type of symbol to show our openness and our support. You know, in Canada, Bill C-16 is like this veil. Once we got Bill C-16 in 2017, Canada must be a superstar, must be utopia, and it's not. You know, a lot of folks still have a very, very hard time accessing, you know, public health care in Canada, and many social services that should be free. So
But you know what's interesting, Emma? It's like we are at a like real niche, right? Being a labor organization and being the union representing these groups of people, right? Our workers, like we could be that layer in the middle, right? And really, really impact our membership, you know? And I think that is like where we can, as labor, focus on that disparity, at least, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing is true, whatever you take away tonight, unions establish that cushion, that superior level of protection. And so keep doing what you're doing, or amp up what you're doing, because we need more of it.
Yep.
Any final thoughts before we close? It is with deep gratitude that we want to thank each and every one of you participants for hanging on today in this webinar, for taking part in this journey with us. Please remember to visit the UFCW Outreach's webpage, www.ufcwoutreach.org, for your copy of the report, for resources and contact information. Please visit our social media also, including our Facebook page, to stay up to date on upcoming UFCW Outreach events, including information for the March 16th upcoming Transgender Institute training presented by Outreach. Thank you so much, everyone. We can leave it open for a couple of minutes should you want to make any other statements or questions, but this officially closes the webinar tonight. And thank you most of all, UFCW Outreach panelists who did such an incredible job tonight.